He went to teach his son a lesson about wealth, but a homeless mother outside the restaurant taught him a lesson about life. What he did for her left his son and everyone watching in tears. This is a story that will restore your faith in humanity. The world was a spreadsheet, and Arthur Vance was its master. Every human interaction was a transaction, every emotion a variable to be controlled. At 72, his hair was a shock of silver. His suits were woven from authority, and his eyes held the cool, calculating gleam of a man who could move markets with a phone call. He was a fortress of wealth, and the drawbridge had been up for decades. Tonight, however, was a mandated transaction labeled father-son bonding across the impossibly polished mahogany table of Le Celeste, a restaurant where the napkins cost more than most, people's weekly groceries, sat his son, Leo. At 20, Leo was a portrait of everything Arthur had provided and everything he failed to understand. Dressed in a simple, well-worn jacket instead of the tailored one Arthur had sent, Leo's eyes weren't fixed on the gold leaf menu. They were fixed on his father, with a mixture of love and profound disappointment. The turbot is sustainably sourced from a private Nordic fjord I partially own, Arthur stated, not looking up from the menu. You should try it. It's an experience. I'm sure it is, Dad, Leo replied, his voice quiet but firm. But do we own the conditions of the fishermen who catch it? Are they paid a living wage? Arthur sighed, the sound like rustling banknotes. Always the activist, Leo. This is a dinner, not a board meeting for your conscience. Can we, for one evening, just enjoy the fruits of a lifetime of work? This fruit feels a little sterile. Leo gestured around the cavernous, silent dining room. It's all so perfect, so quiet. Don't you ever miss the noise? The real world? This is the real world, son. The world of success. The world I built for you. Or a cage you built for yourself, Leo murmured, so low Arthur almost missed it. The air between them grew thick and cold, the chasm of their ideologies wider than the 12 feet of polished wood separating them. Arthur felt a familiar frustration. He had given Leo everything. The best schools, the safest neighborhoods, a future free from want, and in return, his son seemed to only see the cost of it all, not the value. Just as Arthur was about to launch into a lecture on economic realities, his eyes drifted past Leo, through the floor-to-ceiling, window that separated their rarefied air from the bustling city street outside. The noise Leo spoke of was right there, and in that noise he saw her. She was a splash of faded color against the gray concrete, a stark living oil painting of hardship just beyond the glass. A young woman, couldn't be older than 25, with a weariness in her posture that spoke of ages. She was huddled in a thin, threadbare jacket, her arms wrapped tightly around a small bundle, swaddled in a clean but frayed blanket. A child, an infant. She wasn't begging. She wasn't holding a sign. She was simply sitting on a cold step. Her body curved around the baby in a perfect, desperate shield against the evening chill. Every few moments she would rock gently, a universal soothing motion. Then she would pull the blanket back just an inch to peer inside. And Arthur, from his distant throne, saw the flash of a mother's smile, a smile so tender, and so at odds with the grim line of her mouth when she looked up. It was the look in her eyes that truly snagged Arthur's attention. They weren't pleading or pathetic. They were resolute. They were the eyes of a soldier holding a line, a fortress far more formidable than his own. She was fighting a war on that step, a war against the cold, against hunger, against a world that had let her slip through its cracks. He watched as she pulled a half-eaten banana from a plastic bag. She carefully broke off a tiny piece, mashing it with her fingers before gently feeding it to the baby. Then she ate the remaining, larger piece herself, but Arthur saw the hesitation in her movement. She was calculating, making the food last, ensuring the child was fed first. "Dad, are you even listening?" Leo's voice pulled him back. Arthur blinked, refocusing on his son. The $500 bottle of Bordeaux suddenly tasted like ash in his mouth. "That woman," Arthur said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "Outside. With the baby." Leo turned to look, his face immediately softening with empathy. "Oh, that's heartbreaking. It's getting really cold out. I saw a few people like her on my way here. The new shelter on 5th is already full. The system is broken, Dad." Arthur didn't hear the political commentary this time. He only saw the image burned into his mind, the mother's resolute eyes, the gentle rocking, the shared banana. It was a transaction of pure love, with no balance sheet, no profit margin. It was the most valuable thing he had witnessed in years, and it was happening in the poverty he had spent a lifetime insulating himself from. A memory, long buried under layers of ambition and acquisition, stirred in the depths of his soul. A memory of his own mother, working 2 jobs, her hands raw and chapped, her smile tired but unwavering as she placed a single, small meatball on his plate, claiming she wasn't hungry. He had been Leo's age when he vowed to never be that poor again. He had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, but in doing so, he had built a wall between himself and that memory, and now this young woman was tearing that wall down brick by brick. "Leo," Arthur said, his voice a low, decisive rumble. He placed his napkin on the table with a finality that made his son stare. "What is it?" "I want you to watch something. I want you to see what your old, out-of-touch father is about to do." Before Leo could respond, Arthur stood up. He didn't summon the waiter. He didn't make a call. He simply turned and walked, his footsteps echoing in the hushed restaurant towards the main entrance. The maître d' looked startled. "Mr. Vance, is everything all right? Is the wine not to your—" "Everything is fine, Henri," Arthur said, not breaking his stride. He pushed through the heavy, brass-handled door, the warm, perfumed air of Le Céleste, instantly replaced by the crisp, diesel-scented chill of the city. The sounds of traffic and distant sirens, once just background noise, were now immediate and loud. He walked towards the woman. She looked up as his shadow fell over her, and her body instinctively tightened around her baby. Her eyes, those resolute eyes, now held a flicker of fear. She was used to being ignored, occasionally pitied, sometimes scorned. But she was not used to being approached by men in suits that probably cost more than a year of her life. "Please," she said, her voice a fragile shield. "I'm not causing any trouble. We'll move soon." Arthur, for the first time in 40 years, found himself at a loss for words. The billionaire who commanded boardrooms was tongue-tied before a homeless mother. He cleared his throat, feeling strangely vulnerable. He began, his voice softer than he intended. "My name is Arthur. My son and I are having dinner inside. It's very warm in there. And there is far too much food for just 2 people." He saw the suspicion in her eyes. It was a well-honed survival instinct. She glanced past him at the imposing facade of the restaurant, then back at his face. "I don't want any trouble," she repeated, holding her baby closer. "I'm not offering trouble," Arthur said, and to his own surprise, he slowly crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. It was a gesture of humility he hadn't made in a business setting in decades. "I'm offering a warm seat and a hot meal. For you and your child. No strings attached." He saw the war waging within her, pride versus desperation, fear versus a primal need for warmth and food. Her baby let out a small whimpering sound, and that seemed to decide it. "My name is Sarah," she whispered. "And this is Lily." Arthur gave a single slow nod. "Sarah? It would be my honor if you and Lily would join us, Sarah." He stood and offered his hand. Not to help her up, but to take the worn diaper bag slung over her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but a significant one. After a moment's hesitation, she handed it to him. Inside the restaurant, Leo watched, his jaw slack with utter disbelief. He saw his father, the titan of industry, crouching on the dirty pavement. He saw him speaking to the woman, not with condescension, but with a strange newfound respect. He saw him take her bag, and he saw them start to walk towards the entrance together. The world, as Leo knew it, had just tilted off its axis. The silence in Le Céleste became a physical entity, thick and stunned, as Arthur Vance held the door open for Sarah and her baby. Every patron, every impeccably dressed waiter froze. It was as if a ghost had walked in, or more accurately, as if reality had breached their sacred, gilded space. Henri, the maître d' looked as if he was witnessing a cardinal sin. "Mr. Vance, The dress code," he stammered, his eyes wide with horror. Arthur fixed him with a gaze that had made CEOs crumble. "Henri, we have 2 more guests. Please set 2 more places at my table. Immediately." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Henri, pale and flustered, scurried away. Leo stood up as they approached, his expression a whirlwind of confusion, awe, and concern. "Dad, what's happening?" "Leo, this is Sarah and her daughter." "Lily," Arthur said, his voice calm, as if inviting a homeless family to a Michelin-starred restaurant was an everyday occurrence. "Sarah, this is my son, Leo." "Hi," Leo said, his voice full of genuine warmth, pulling out a chair for her. "Please, sit down. It's so cold out." "Are you okay?" Sarah just nodded, her eyes darting around the opulent room, looking utterly terrified and out of place. She sat stiffly on the plush velvet chair, holding Lily as if she were a lifeline. The baby, soothed by the warmth, had fallen asleep. A waiter arrived with 2 more settings of heavy silverware and crystal, placing them with a quiet clink that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. He handed Sarah a menu. She stared at it, her hands trembling slightly. There were no prices. To her it must have seemed like a document in a foreign, unknowable language. Arthur watched her, and something in his chest tightened. He remembered his first business lunch, feeling intimidated and out of his depth. This was 1,000 times worse for her. "Perhaps," Arthur said, leaning forward, "we could order for the table? A selection of dishes to share. I know the chef personally. He can make something gentle for the baby as well." Sarah just nodded again, unable to speak. Leo, recovering from his shock, took charge. "That's a great idea. Dad, let's get some soups, some bread, something nourishing." He smiled at Sarah. "The food here is amazing. You're going to love it." The first course arrived, a delicate butternut, squash soup with a drizzle of sage oil. Sarah looked at the intricate presentation, then at her sleeping baby, unsure what to do. "Here," Arthur said, surprising himself again. He gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Let me hold her, just while you eat. You must be hungry." Sarah looked at him, then at the soup, a war of emotions on her face. The need for hot food was powerful. Slowly, carefully, she transferred the sleeping Lily into Arthur's waiting arms. The moment the small, warm weight settled against his chest, something monumental shifted inside Arthur Vance. He, who had held billion-dollar deals in his hands, had never held anything that felt this valuable, this fragile. He looked down at the tiny, sleeping face, the rosebud mouth, the long lashes. He could feel the steady, trusting rhythm of her breath. This was a human life, a life with no portfolio, no net worth, no agenda. It was the purest form of value he had ever encountered. He watched as Sarah tentatively picked up her spoon. She took a first small sip of the soup, then another. And then the dam broke. She began to eat, not with the refined manners of the room, but with the raw, grateful urgency of someone who had been truly hungry. She didn't care about the other patrons' stares. She was feeding her body, and for a few precious minutes she was safe and warm. Arthur Vance, billionaire, sat holding a stranger's baby, watching a stranger eat. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was finally doing something that truly, unequivocally mattered. As the main courses arrived, seared scallops, a tender confit duck, a delicate pasta, a semblance of normalcy began to settle over the table. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a quiet, focused compassion, led surprisingly by Arthur. With Lily still sleeping soundly in the crook of his arm, he spoke to Sarah, his voice low and gentle. "You don't have to tell us anything, Sarah, but if you'd like to, we're listening." Sarah, her hunger sated and her body warmed, seemed to uncoil slightly. She looked from Arthur, who was gazing at her baby with an unexpected tenderness, to Leo, whose face was an open book of empathy. She took a deep, shaky breath. It's not a very unique story," she began, her voice gaining a little strength. "I had a job, an apartment. Then I got pregnant. Lily's father, he wasn't ready. He left." She said it simply, without bitterness, as if stating a fact of nature. "I managed for a while, but then my mom got sick. I took time off to care for her, and the bills piled up. I lost my job. Then the apartment." She looked down at her hands clenched in her lap. "The shelters are full. I've been on waiting lists for months. I get a little help from a charity, but it's not enough for a deposit on a new place. It's just a cycle. You fall and it's so hard to get back up. Every day is just about making it to the next, keeping her safe, keeping her fed." She looked at Lily, her eyes glistening. "She's my reason for everything. I I feel like I'm failing her." "You are not failing her," Arthur said, his voice firm, brooking no argument. "You are here. You are fighting for her. That is the very opposite of failure." Leo reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." "Sarah, the system is designed to make you feel like a failure, but it's the system that's broken, not you." Arthur listened, truly listened. This wasn't a statistic in a charity report. This was a human being. Her story was a cascade of small, understandable tragedies: a lost job, a sick parent, a broken relationship that had snowballed into a catastrophe. There was no grand laziness, no moral failing. It was a series of cracks in a foundation that had no safety net. He thought of his own life. A single bad investment, a market crash, a failed product launch. He had the resources to absorb those shocks, to pivot, to recover. Sarah had no such cushion. One push was all it took to send her over the edge. "Where do you sleep?" Arthur asked, his mind already beginning to work, not as a philanthropist, but as a problem solver. "Wherever we can," she said softly. "The 24-hour laundromat is good when it's empty. Sometimes the late-night subway if I have the fare. But it's not safe. I'm always so scared for her." The confession hung in the air, a stark, chilling truth that silenced even Arthur. His own fears were about stock fluctuations and shareholder meetings. Hers were about the physical safety of her child in the dead of night. He looked at Leo and saw tears in his son's eyes. In that moment, the chasm that had separated them all evening vanished. They were no longer a billionaire and an activist. They were simply two human beings, united in their shared understanding of another's pain. Arthur gently rocked the baby, his mind a whirlwind. Writing a check was the obvious solution, the easy solution. But for the first time it felt insufficient. It felt hollow. He had stumbled into the middle of a human story, and a simple financial transaction felt like an insult to the courage he was witnessing. Dessert was served, a delicate chocolate fondant with a melting core, accompanied by tiny cups of intensely strong coffee. Sarah tried a small bite of the cake, her eyes widening at the rich, complex flavor. It was a tiny moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure in a life that had been stripped of such things. Arthur had carefully handed a now-stirring Lily back to her mother. The physical connection was broken, but the emotional one was forged in steel. He watched Sarah tend to her daughter, her movements instinctive and loving. Leo was quiet, watching his father. He could see the gears turning behind Arthur's eyes, the intense focus that usually preceded a multi-million-dollar acquisition. But the target this time wasn't a company. It was a life. "Sarah," Arthur began, folding his hands on the table, "I am a man of business. I see problems and I look for solutions. Sustainable ones." Sarah looked at him, a flicker of that old suspicion returning. "What kind of solution?" "I am not going to just give you a sum of money," he said, and Leo's head snapped up, a flash of disappointment on his face. But Arthur held up a hand. "Hear me out. A lump sum in your current situation could be more of a burden than a blessing. It could make you a target. It could be mismanaged out of desperation. I've seen it happen." He leaned forward, his gaze intent. "I am going to offer you a partnership." "Does a partnership?" Sarah echoed, utterly bewildered. "Yes. My company, Vance Holdings, has a corporate social responsibility arm. Its current strategy is inefficient. I'm dissolving it, and I'm starting a new one, a proper one. And I want you to be its first client and its first consultant." Leo's mouth fell open. Sarah just stared. "Here is what I propose," Arthur continued, his voice crisp and clear. "First, tonight you and Lily will not go back to the street. My driver will take you to the penthouse suite at the Alexander Hotel, which I own. You will stay there as long as you need. It is safe, it is warm, and there is room service." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "Second, tomorrow my personal assistant will meet you. She will take you to find a permanent, safe, and comfortable apartment. The lease will be in your name, and the first 2 years' rent will be prepaid by the new foundation. It will be your home. Third," Arthur said, his voice softening slightly, "you need an income, not a handout, a career. We will get you a financial advisor and a career counselor. We will pay for any training or education you need or want. If you wish to work, we will find you a position. either within my company or elsewhere, that pays a living wage and offers dignity. If you wish to stay home with Lily for a while, the foundation will provide a stipend to allow you to do so without fear. He paused, letting the magnitude of his offer sink in. It wasn't just money, it was a scaffold. It was a carefully constructed path back to independence, to safety, to self-respect. And finally, Arthur said, looking directly into her eyes, I need your help. You said the system is broken. You've lived it. I want you to help me design the new foundation. I want you to tell us what works, what doesn't, where the real needs are. I will pay you a consultant's fee for your expertise. Your experience has value, Sarah, immense value. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah was crying openly now, silent tears of shock, relief and a dawning impossible hope. She clutched Lily to her chest, her entire body trembling. Leo looked at his father, and the pride and love in his eyes was a brighter, warmer thing than any success Arthur had ever achieved. Dad? Leo whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That's... Sarah found her voice, a broken, grateful whisper. Why would you do all this for me? You don't even know me. Arthur Vance, the man who built an empire on cold, hard logic, felt a single, unexpected tear escape and trace a path down his lined cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Because, he said, his voice rough with an emotion he hadn't felt in years, for 40 years, I've been looking at the world through a spreadsheet. Tonight, you and your daughter gave me a chance to look at it through my heart. This isn't charity, Sarah. This is a debt of gratitude. The ride away from Le Céleste was unlike any car journey Arthur had ever taken. His silent armored limousine was usually a mobile office, a place of calls and calculations. Tonight it was a sanctuary. Sarah sat beside him, holding a sleeping Lily, staring out the window at the glittering city as if seeing it for the first time. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by a dazed, quiet wonder. Leo sat across from them, a serene smile on his face, occasionally reaching out to gently touch Lily's tiny foot. They pulled up under the glittering marquee of the Alexander, the city's most exclusive hotel. The general manager was waiting, having received a call that had undoubtedly sent him into a controlled panic. He bowed slightly as Arthur emerged. Mr. Vance, everything is prepared just as you instructed. The penthouse suite is ready. A baby crib, formula, food, everything you requested has been stocked. Thank you, Charles, Arthur said. He turned to Sarah. This is Sarah. She and her daughter are my most honored guests. They are to have anything they desire, anything at all. Understood. Absolutely, sir. Of course. An attendant gently took Sarah's meager bag. She turned to Arthur and Leo, her emotions overwhelming her once more. I don't know how to ever thank you. Thank us by sleeping safely tonight, Leo said, smiling. Thank us by dreaming about a future without fear. She nodded, unable to speak, and allowed the manager to escort her inside. Arthur and Leo stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching her go. The cold night air didn't feel harsh anymore. It felt clean, full of possibility. Dad, Leo said, turning to his father, I have never been more proud to be your son. What you did tonight, that was unbelievable. Arthur put a hand on his son's shoulder, a genuine, warm smile gracing his features for the first time in years. No, Leo, what you did tonight was make me look. You were right. I had built a cage. You and Sarah, you handed me the key. They got back into the car. The partition was up, giving them privacy. So, Leo said, a new energy in his voice, the Sarah Foundation? We need to draft a mission statement. We need to partner with existing NGOs, not just bulldoze them. We need to focus on systemic change, not just individual rescue, though that's important too. We need to look at housing first models, job training programs that actually lead to careers. Arthur listened, a real hearty laugh erupting from his chest. It was a sound he barely recognized. Slow down, son. We have time. But first, he said, his smile softening, first let's go home. I think we have a lot to talk about. For the first time, the word home didn't just mean a large, empty penthouse. It meant a connection. It meant a shared purpose. Arthur Vance had gone out for a dinner to connect with his son and had ended up rediscovering his own humanity. The fortress walls had crumbled, and in their place, he was starting to build a bridge. 1 year later. The community center in a once forgotten part of the city was buzzing with life and laughter. It was a bright, clean, welcoming space, with a play area for children, a computer lab and classrooms. A small, tasteful plaque by the entrance read, "The Lily Foundation." Inside, a small celebration was underway. Arthur Vance stood at a modest podium, but he wasn't wearing a suit worth thousands. He wore a simple, comfortable sweater, and he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Sarah. She looked like a different person, not because of her clothes, which were neat and professional, but because of the light in her eyes. The weariness was gone, replaced by a calm confidence. She held Lily's hand, a toddler now, chubby-cheeked and curious, wearing a tiny, pretty dress. To Arthur's other side stood Leo, beaming with pride. "We are not here today to celebrate a handout," Arthur said to the small crowd of families, community leaders, and press. "We are here to celebrate a hand-up. The Lily Foundation is not about my wealth. It is about the wealth of human potential that exists in every single person in this room, in this city. It's about providing the stability, the housing, the childcare, the training, to allow that potential to flourish." He gestured to Sarah. "1 year ago, I met a woman whose strength humbled me. She taught me more about resilience, love, and the true meaning of value than any business deal ever could." Sarah is now not only a wonderful mother to Lily, but she is also the head of client relations for this foundation. She is the one who ensures our programs are built with empathy and understanding, because she has lived the reality. The room erupted in applause. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "1 year ago, my world was very small. It was a cold step and a fear that never went away," she said. "Today I have a home. I have a career I love. My daughter is safe and happy. But the greatest gift Mr. Vance and Leo gave me wasn't the apartment or the job. It was the belief that I was worth investing in, that my story mattered. The Lily Foundation is built on that belief for everyone." After the speeches, Arthur knelt down as Lily toddled over to him. She giggled as he picked her up, settling her on his hip with the practiced ease of a doting grandfather. "Look at you, little one," he murmured, his voice full of affection. Leo came and stood beside him, putting an arm around his father's shoulders. "You know, Dad, for years I wondered what your legacy would be. Skyscrapers, corporations. I never thought it would be this." Arthur looked around the vibrant, hopeful room. He saw single mothers getting career advice, fathers learning new skills, children playing safely. He saw Sarah, smiling and talking animatedly, with a young woman who reminded him of her from 1 year ago. "This, Leo," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is the only legacy that matters. I spent a lifetime building a fortune, but it took a cold night, a hungry mother, and a tiny baby to teach me how to truly be rich." He held Lily a little tighter, knowing that the most unbelievable thing he had ever done wasn't an act of grand philanthropy, but a simple human act of seeing someone in the shadows, and instead of looking away, offering a seat at his table. And in doing so, he had finally truly found his way home.